Today's Japanese slang terms, in the plural, is going to take us back to the early 1990s because I'm going to talk about a set of terms used predominantly by young women that all arose around 1990, 1991, and were very much stimulated by changes in the Japanese economy and the dating scene due to the bubble period, where people found themselves with a lot more money than they used to have and were negotiating new approaches to relationships within a period of unquestionable excess. The first of these is Ashi, or more commonly often ashikun. This comes from foot, obviously kind of spread out, and was used by some young women, the sum is key here, to refer to men that they spent time with specifically because the man would drive them places or come and pick them up. And this is true with all the terms we're discussing, one that there may be some kind of teasing of a relationship that may come from all this effort, but the person using the term ashikun has no actual intention of developing a relationship whatsoever. Now, obviously, I can't find tweets from the 1900s using this term, but you can see a clear example here where somebody notes how advice on a 2025 Japanese dating show to immediately go and pick up a woman who asks you for a ride would turn you into an ashi, right? Using this old term to criticize the advice being given for making you somebody that is used rather than somebody that is actually kind of in a relationship. And while again, people may call this a dead term, you can absolutely still find people using it, even if it's often kind of, potentially self-depreciating or ironic. This person notes that they went to Costco, but then calls themselves an ashi, right? Which there is no context here. It could be a lot of things, but I take to mean sort of a, oh, I drove my family to Costco kind of vibe. Here somebody pokes fun at their senpai, who I assume they're not in a relationship with, but who knows, calling them an ashikun because the senpai gave them a ride. And ashi here is the most well-known of all the terms I'm going to talk about, although they are all kind of related. They were used by the same kind of women. But this one made one of the top slang lists of 1990, which kind of hedges the definition by saying that the men are asking for nothing in return. And yeah, they may be asking for nothing in return, but you generally assume they were hoping for something. But from the perspective of the women using this term, they're not going to get it. And while again, I can't find women using this in the 1990s, I can find it appearing in books like this one, or even being mentioned in a book by Beat Takashi from 1993. Again, though, this word is just representative of a number of similar terms, the second being Meshikun. This comes from meshi, right? Food, eating. And this refers to somebody who, again, you don't actually see yourself ever being in a real relationship with, but you will allow them to pay for your meals. So in these tweets here, we can assume that the person posting did not pay for their food. And this next person refers to themselves as both an ashi and a meshi, which, again, no context. So this could be anything from actually kind of being used for their car and their wallet, or just kind of a joking self-depreciation over somebody who took their partner out for a date and was very happy to do so. But while we cannot effectively use this kind of data to analyze the intents of the users, we can see that the fundamental meaning of person who drives somebody somewhere and person who pays for something is still extant in these words, and they are still being used, again, even if they may be layered with a huge amount of irony and self-awareness. The language fun of these women who were getting a lot of free stuff did not end there, though, because there was also Mitsugu or Mitsugu-kun, which comes from the Japanese verb mitsugu, which means to give. Now, if you're like, wait a minute, what about ageru or something like that? Yes, that's more normal. In non-slang Japanese, mitsugu has kind of a fancy giving to a lord, giving to like a god. It's used in words like koken, which is like to contribute to something. It has kind of that heavy feel to it. But in this context, it was a person that you hang out with because they give you gifts. Like me, being your Mitsugu-kun by giving you all these Japanese videos and giving you nothing in return, except for likes, retweets, and subscribes. Look at me, doing the influencer thing. And again, yes, this term does still see some potentially very self-aware use in 2025, such as this person who I think is like giving a bunch of stuff to a character in a game to unlock them. So metaphorically getting nothing in return besides the ability to spend time with the character. And here somebody uses it to critique the Prime Minister of Japan, Takaichi Sanai, for giving Abe's golf clubs to Donald Trump, using the term as a form of kind of political critique, in implying that Japan got nothing out of the trade. What if you actually like one of these various kuns you're spending time with? Well, then you might call them the Kipukun, sort of, because Kipukun, which is like a keeper, right, actually refers to one of your various men friends that you would be okay with settling with, but they're actually not your number one pick. The poor Kipukun is usually somebody that is there to fill in the gap between the actual people you want to end up with, who are known as homemake or homeikun, being there to soften the blow of a breakup or just allow you to have a little bit of fun in between relationships that you see to be more permanent. This recent use here is pretty authentic in that it's like literally someone saying that the person they were having kind of a fun little fling with, who they refer to as a Kipukun, got upset when the author of the tweet told them that they were actually going to go with somebody else who was, the homemade. Both hilariously and sadly, it's hard to find uses of this more recently because there was a very popular seal named Kipukun who people talk about quite a lot that passed away in 2025. So there's a lot of discourse over the last few years about this seal, most recently being memorials for how wonderful people thought it was. Clearly, Kipukun was a homemade. Now, obviously, I don't endorse the various behaviors that these terms represent, but I do think they're very interesting as they sort of serve as a window into a very, very specific period of Japanese history, which again was the bubble period, when a lot of Japanese people found themselves with a lot more wealth, allowing men to become drivers, gift givers, food buyers, etc. And women found themselves building on more and more differences in the dating scene in Japan, in dating norms. Not all women, of course, just the ones that were using these terms. Moving from a position of those who are kind of given away by their families, etc., more and more into people who get to choose who they want to date and explore different options, even if some of those explorations were more ethical than others. And no, we're not doing a Sapir-Whorf linguistic relativism thing here. We don't do that on this channel. It is true that new words are often invented to express things and describe things that are themselves new, activities that are new, or not new. I'm sure women have done this throughout the history of Japan. Men exploring relationships with a bunch of different women that they don't expect to have a long relationship with runs throughout the history of time. But just as you know, Japan having various words for seaweed, while in English we kind of only had one, does potentially reflect that Japan used seaweed in more ways than we did in the West. The emergence of these terms does seem to indicate a need for them by a population that is exploring new ways of being in Japan, which of course reflect changes in Japanese society. And so while I want to talk about these terms because they're interesting, that's why I talk about any term, I also think they're a really good example of kind of why I do these videos. Because while the things we talk about here can be very, very silly, the terms can die off very, very fast, and at times the topics can be unpleasant, they do reflect changes in how people are spending time. And yeah, that's my thesis statement. That's the end. That's all I have to say. So I'm going to go home and spend time with my homemade.